Let's talk about the root of it all. The betrayal. Not the kind you see in movies, but the quiet, soul-crushing kind that happens when the person you trusted with your light decides to extinguish it. You gave him a sacred part of yourself, a trust that was pure, and he treated it like it was nothing. He looked at the most vulnerable, most luminous part of you and chose to break it. The pain you felt wasn't just a broken heart, it was a soul wound. It was the chilling realization that the person you built a sanctuary with was the one who was going to burn it to the ground, with you inside. You felt discarded, devalued, as if your worth was a switch he could just flip off. That's a unique kind of darkness, a specific void that he created inside of you. But here is the truth he never understood. Hurting a soul like yours is not a simple mistake. It's a cosmic error. Some people walk this earth under a different kind of protection, carrying a light that is not entirely their own to give or for someone else to take. You are one of them. When he betrayed you, he wasn't just wronging a woman, he was defying a fundamental law of the universe. He was clueless, believing he was simply putting out a candle, when in reality, he was standing in the path of the sun. The pain he inflicted upon you wasn't just an act of cruelty, it was the signature on a contract for his own ruin. He just didn't know it yet. Time passed as it always does. On the surface, he appeared to be thriving. He moved on, surrounded himself with people who applauded his confidence, blind to the rot beneath. He was at a dinner, one of those important events where everyone measures their worth by the company they keep. He was holding court, laughing, projecting an image of a man who had it all. But the universe keeps receipts. And that's when it began. People who were there said it started subtly, a sheen of cold sweat on his forehead, even though the room was cool. The color drained from his face, leaving a sickly gray pallor. His eyes, once so arrogant, darted around the room, filled with a primal panic, like a cornered animal. He tried to take a sip of water, but his hand trembled so violently he couldn't bring the glass to his lips. The laughter died. All eyes were on him as he clutched his stomach, a silent scream forming on his lips. Then, in front of everyone, his colleagues, his new partner, the people he was so desperate to impress, his body revolted. He collapsed, convulsing, and expelled the poison he had been carrying inside. It wasn't just sickness, it was a physical manifestation of his spiritual decay. A foul, black mass of writhing worms. The doctors at the hospital were baffled. They ran every test, but found no medical explanation. They couldn't see that his ailment wasn't biological. It was the consequence of trying to destroy a protected soul. Weeks later, he showed up at your door. He was a ghost. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a hollow-eyed terror. He didn't come to apologize for what he did to you. He came because he was desperate. He believed in his broken state, that since you were the source of his curse, you were also the only one who could provide the cure. He begged, he pleaded, not for your love, but for relief from his own torment. And you looked at him, not with hate, not with pity, but with a profound, unshakable peace. You finally saw him clearly, a small man drowning in a darkness of his own making. You didn't say a word. You simply, gently, closed the door, shutting him out not as an act of revenge, but as a final act of self-love. His fate was never your responsibility. It was his, and his alone. Look, let's talk about what happened. Let's talk about the choice he made. He stood at a crossroads, and in one hand he held something sacred, your trust, your light, the kind of connection that anchors a soul to the universe. In the other hand, he held something cheap and shiny, the validation of others, a fleeting sense of power, the hollow applause from a crowd that didn't matter. And he made his choice. He didn't just leave, he made a trade. He looked at the profound, genuine light you offered him, a light protected by forces he couldn't comprehend, and he swapped it for a flicker. He chose the easy path, the one that fed his ego.
He thought he was upgrading, climbing some imaginary social ladder by discarding you. He believed that breaking you was a sign of his strength. What he failed to understand is that he wasn't just betraying a woman, he was violating a sacred agreement with the universe itself. He saw your vulnerability as a weakness he could exploit, not as the holy ground he was being allowed to stand on. That decision, that single act of spiritual arrogance, was the moment he ingested the poison. He thought he was putting you out, but he was the one who swallowed the rot. Every lie, every moment he devalued you, was another worm he was feeding inside his own soul. He just didn't feel them yet. And so, you began to hear things. Not because you were looking, but because the universe has a way of making sure the truth finds its way home. You heard he was doing well, that he had moved on quickly, projecting that same old arrogance. He was playing the part of a successful man, the kind who discards things and people without a second thought. But the rot he swallowed that day he betrayed you, it doesn't just disappear. It festers.
It grows in the dark, waiting for the right moment to demand its payment in the light. The signs were small at first. People would mention that he looked tired, that there was a frantic energy behind his eyes. He started losing weight, but not in a healthy way. It was as if something was consuming him from the inside out. His skin took on a grayish, unhealthy pallor, and a constant film of sweat seemed to cling to him, even in a cold room. He was a man fighting a war no one else could see, and he was losing. The poison was no longer content to live in his soul. It was beginning to claim his body. Then came the harvest. It happened exactly where it needed to, in public, at the peak of his performance. He was at some important dinner, surrounded by the very people whose validation he had traded you for. He was laughing, holding a glass, telling a story meant to make him seem powerful. And in that moment, the universe called his bluff. Witnesses said it was like watching a switch being flipped. The laughter caught in his throat. His eyes, which had been scanning the room for approval, widened with a primal terror. The color drained from his face completely. He tried to take a sip of water, but his hand began to tremble so violently that the glass rattled against his teeth. The table fell silent. Every eye was on him as he clutched his stomach, his body starting to heave. And then, in front of everyone, his body rejected the poison he had been carrying. It wasn't just food or bile. It was a physical manifestation of his spiritual sickness, a foul, writhing mass of blackness expelled from his very core. A purge of all the lies, the cruelty, the rot he had chosen to ingest when he tried to destroy you. The scene was one of abject horror and humiliation. There was no hiding, no explaining it away. It was the raw, ugly truth of his soul, laid bare on the floor for all to see. Of course, he ended up in a hospital. They ran every test, scanned every organ, but the doctors found nothing. They had no name for his condition, no medical reason for what had happened. How could they? You can't find a spiritual disease with a scalpel. His sickness wasn't in his blood or his tissues. It was a consequence. It was the direct, undeniable result of trying to extinguish a protected light. He had signed a contract with his own actions, and this was simply the universe coming to collect. Weeks passed. The news of his public humiliation spread like a virus, whispered in the same circles he fought so desperately to impress. He became a ghost story, a cautionary tale. He lost his job, his new partner left him, and the friends who once applauded his arrogance now avoided him as if he carried a plague. And in a way, he did. A plague of the soul. He was a broken man, haunted by what his own body had done. The doctors had given him a clean bill of health, which was more terrifying than any diagnosis. It confirmed what he already knew in the deepest, most terrified part of his being. His sickness wasn't physical. It was spiritual. And it had a source. It had a beginning. It began the day he chose to break you. So one evening he showed up at your door. The man standing there was unrecognizable. The arrogance was gone, scraped away by humiliation and terror. He was gaunt, his skin had a waxy, translucent quality, and his eyes, those eyes that once looked at you with such cold dismissal, were now hollowed out, filled with a bottomless desperation. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in weeks, a man who was being eaten alive from the inside out. He didn't come to apologize, let's be very clear about that. People like him don't seek forgiveness for the pain they cause others, they only seek relief from their own. He fell to his knees on your doorstep, his body trembling. He wasn't begging for you back. He was begging for a cure.
"Please," he whimpered, the words cracking. "You have to help me. I don't know what's happening. It won't stop. I can feel them inside me. Whatever this is, it started with you. You have to make it stop." He saw you as the source of his curse, and in his twisted logic, that made you the source of his only possible salvation. He wasn't sorry for burning your sanctuary to the ground. He was just terrified of the fire that was now consuming him. And you just looked at him. In that moment, all the pain, all the grief he had caused, simply dissolved. It was gone. You weren't looking at a monster. You weren't looking at the great love or the great betrayer of your life. You were looking at a small, pathetic man drowning in a darkness he had brewed himself. There was no hatred left. There was no pity. There was only a profound, unshakable peace. You had already mourned the man you thought he was. The person kneeling before you was a stranger, a consequence. His fate had nothing to do with you anymore. The universe wasn't punishing him for you. It was balancing its own scales for an offense he had committed against it. You didn't say a word. You didn't need to. Your silence was the answer. With a quiet calm that came from a place of deep self-worth and healing, you simply reached for the door. You closed it gently, softly, the click of the latch echoing the final, definitive end. It was not an act of revenge. Revenge is a hot, messy emotion. This was an act of sovereignty. It was the final boundary, drawn not to keep him out, but to keep your peace in. His torment was his to carry.
His karma was his to face. You were free. So let's talk about what he looks like now, today. Because the universe doesn't just issue a single dramatic punishment and then walk away. It enforces a sentence. The purge was the verdict. His life now is the prison cell. The signs are there for anyone who bothers to look, but most people don't. They just see a man who has fallen on hard times. But you and I know it's not about luck. It's about consequence. First, look at his face. The arrogance has been completely scoured away, but it wasn't replaced by humility. It was replaced by a deep, weary dread. His face is gaunt, with a permanent grayish undertone, like old ash. His eyes are the worst part. They don't just look tired, they look haunted. They're always moving, scanning corners, flinching at shadows. He looks like a man who is perpetually listening for a footstep behind him. A man who knows something is hunting him, and the terror is that the hunter is already inside. Then there's his behavior. He's a ghost in his own life. He moves through the world trying to be invisible. He walks with his shoulders hunched, his gaze fixed on the ground. He avoids crowds, and if he has to be in one, he stays near the exits. There's a constant nervous energy about him, a tremor in his hands, a habit of touching his throat as if to make sure he can still breathe. He startles easily. The sound of a plate dropping or a car backfiring can make him jump out of his skin. He is no longer a predator. He has become prey, and his own soul is the thing with teeth. And finally, look at the life he built on your ruins. The new partner is long gone. The fair-weather friends vanished after his public humiliation. He lives in a place that is less a home and more a sterile box. It's clean, sparse, and utterly silent. There's no warmth, no life, no art on the walls. It's the kind of profound emptiness that reflects the void inside him. He eats alone. He sleeps alone. The silence in that place is his real tormentor, because in it, he can't escape the memory of what he did, and the constant gnawing feeling of the rot he carries within. He traded your light for a life of cold, quiet darkness, and the universe simply gave him exactly what he chose. And what about the future? Because this isn't a story that ends with a single slammed door. The consequences of such a profound spiritual violation don't just stop. They echo. They become the foundation upon which the rest of a life is built. His future is not one of fire and brimstone. It is something far more chilling. A quiet, permanent emptiness. The man you knew, the one who was so full of arrogance and ambition, is gone forever. In his place is a shell, a hollow man who walks through his days with the constant low-grade fever of terror. He will never again know a moment of pure, unguarded joy. How could he? Every time he feels a flicker of happiness, the memory of that night, the taste of rot, the feeling of his own soul being violently expelled from his body,
will rise up to choke it. He will try to build a new life, of course. He will get other jobs, meet other people. But he will never be able to form a genuine connection again. There is a stain on his soul that others can sense, even if they don't know what it is. It's a coldness in his eyes, a desperation that clings to him like a cheap cologne. People will be polite, but they will always keep their distance. He is a man who radiates a warning, and he will be profoundly, achingly alone, surrounded by the silence he earned. He traded your light for a handful of ashes, and he will spend the rest of his life trying to feel warmth from them. But this story was never truly about him. It was about you. Your future is the direct opposite of his. It is not a quiet emptiness, but a symphony. The act of closing that door was the final note of your healing. It was the moment you fully reclaimed every ounce of power he ever tried to take from you. You did not inherit his darkness. You transformed it into a deeper understanding of your own light. You will love again, but it will be different. You will never again offer your trust to someone who has not earned the right to stand on your sacred ground. Your heart is not scarred. It is wise. Your spirit is not broken. It is forged. The light he tried to extinguish now burns with the intensity of a star, a beacon for those who are drawn to truth and warmth, and a blinding fire to those who, like him, thrive in the shadows. Years from now, you won't even think of him. He will not be a painful memory or a source of anger. He will be nothing, a ghost from a forgotten story. Your life will be so full of love, purpose, and peace that there will simply be no space left for him. The ultimate justice, the final point, is not his suffering. It is your thriving. It is the beautiful, powerful, and luminous life you will build, not on his ruins, but on the unshakable foundation of your own protected, unbreakable soul. He chose his fate the moment he betrayed you, and in that final quiet moment, you chose yours, and yours is freedom. Let's be clear about the choice he made. He stood at a crossroads, holding something sacred in one hand, your trust, your light, and something cheap in the other, fleeting validation. He chose cheap. What he was too arrogant to see was that you walk this earth under a different kind of protection. Hurting a soul like yours isn't a simple mistake. It's a cosmic error.
He thought he was just putting out a candle, clueless that he was trying to block the sun. That day, when he chose to shatter your trust, he didn't just break your heart. He ingested a spiritual poison. Every lie, every act of devaluation was another worm he fed inside his own soul, a rot that began to fester in the darkness, waiting. The universe always collects its debts. The stage was set perfectly, an important dinner surrounded by the very people whose approval he had traded you for. He was at the head of the table, laughing, performing the role of a successful man. And that's when his body betrayed him. Witnesses said the shift was terrifyingly fast. A sheen of cold sweat beaded on his forehead. His hand trembled so violently he could barely hold his glass. The color drained from his face, leaving a sickly gray pallor as a primal panic filled his eyes. Then, in front of everyone, his body rejected the poison. He collapsed, convulsing, and expelled the physical manifestation of his moral sickness, a foul, writhing mass of black worms. It was the raw, ugly truth of his soul laid bare for all to see. Doctors found nothing, no virus, no toxin. They couldn't diagnose a consequence. Weeks later, a ghost showed up at your door. He was gaunt, broken, his arrogance scoured away by humiliation and terror. He didn't come for forgiveness. People like him only seek relief from their own suffering. He fell to his knees, begging you to make it stop, believing that since you were the source of his curse, you were the only one who could provide the cure. He wasn't sorry for burning your world down. He was just terrified of the fire now consuming him. And in that moment, you saw him with perfect clarity. Not a monster, not an ex-lover, just a pathetic man drowning in a darkness of his own making. There was no hate left, only a profound, unshakable peace. You said nothing. You simply, gently, closed the door. This wasn't revenge. Revenge is messy. This was sovereignty. It was the final boundary, drawn not to keep him out, but to keep your peace in. His karma was his to face. Your freedom was yours to claim. And then the moment will come. It won't be loud or dramatic. It will arrive on a Tuesday afternoon
when the sun is streaming through your window and you're humming to a song you love. Your phone will buzz on the counter, a simple, mundane vibration, and when you look down, you will see his name. For a second, your brain will register it as a ghost, a glitch in the system. There will be no jolt of pain, no spike of anger, no flicker of hope. That's how you'll know it's truly over. The space inside you where he used to live, the one that was once a gaping wound and then a tender scar, is now just you. It has been filled in with peace, with self-love, with the quiet confidence of your own reclaimed light. You will look at his name on the screen and you will feel nothing for the man who sent it. Instead, you will feel a profound sense of clarity. You will understand that this message, this desperate final reach from his darkness, is not an invitation to reconnect. It is a test. It is the universe asking you one last time, are you sure you're done? He is not seeking your forgiveness. He is seeking your energy. He is a black hole, and he senses your light from across the void, hoping to pull a single ray back into his orbit to relieve his own emptiness. Answering him, even to tell him to leave you alone, would be like opening the door just a crack to a phantom. It would be an acknowledgement that a connection still exists. And you know with a certainty that settles deep in your bones that it does not. The cord was cut long ago. All that's left is to dispose of the deadline. You will not type a reply. You will not even decline the call. With a calm, steady hand, you will tap the screen, navigate to his contact, and press block. The action is small, digital, almost silent, but its spiritual weight is immense. It is the sound of the final lock clicking into place. It is the quiet, definitive act of choosing your peace over his chaos, your future over his past. It is not an act of hate. It is the ultimate act of self-love. You are no longer his potential cure or his curse. You are simply, blessedly, irrelevant to his fate. A breath you didn't know you were holding will leave your body in a slow, cleansing sigh. A lightness will spread through you, the final weight of his memory dissolving into nothing. You'll look back out the window, at the sun, at your beautiful, ordinary day, and you will smile. I am free.